On the bustling main street of Ludlow, where medieval stones meet the slow drift of Shropshire air, stands one of England's most celebrated timber-framed buildings. For centuries, travellers have looked up at its black and white facade, a striking array of carved beams, latticed windows, and the unmistakable emblem of the Prince of Wales' three feathers, and known at once that they have reached the Feathers Hotel. Its story, however, began long before the first guest ever crossed its threshold. The building was completed in 1619 for Rhys Jones, a determined and ambitious attorney from Pembrokeshire. Jones had come to Ludlow to pursue his career at the prestigious Council of the Marches, the powerful administrative body that once governed much of Wales and the border counties. Seeking to establish himself among Ludlow's legal elite, Jones commissioned a house that would reflect his growing status. An extraordinary structure of timber and plaster, rich with detail, symbolism and craftsmanship. The house he created was so remarkable that architectural historians would still be discussing it centuries later. The famed scholar Nicolaus Pevsner described it in his influential book, The Buildings of England, as the prodigy of timber-framed houses, a title that has endured in architectural circles ever since. The Cambrian Archaeological Association, writing in 1899, called it the most picturesque of all the half-timbered houses now remaining in Ludlow, praising the fact that despite its later conversion into an inn, none of the old work has been tampered with. Indeed, many of its finest features survive untouched. The original studded plank door, the same one fitted in the early 1600s, still forms the entrance. Guests today look out over the town through lattice windows set with cast iron diamond glazing, framed by moulded mullions and transoms. Inside, dark Jacobean oak panelling climbs to the ceilings. Carved mantelpieces dominate the rooms, and bare Elizabethan timbers lend the interior a rustic grandeur. Even the chimes of the nearby church tower, sounding clearly at midnight and again at 4 in the morning, have been part of the building's soundscape for generations. The Feathers remained a private residence for half a century, before Jones's grandson transformed it into an inn in 1670. A balcony was added for the lively electioneering of the period, turning the building into a focal point of local politics as well as hospitality. From that moment on, the Feathers began welcoming travellers, merchants, judges, soldiers, families, and curious wanderers, a tradition that has continued for more than 350 years. The inn quickly became one of Ludlow's most recognisable landmarks. Its facade, adorned with the carved three feathers motif, helped to cement its identity. Throughout the centuries, it has been admired, painted, photographed, and written about in guidebooks. In 1954, it received Grade 1 listed status, marking it as a building of exceptional national importance. In 1983, the New York Times famously described it as the most handsome inn in the world, while historian Jan Morris wrote that it stands as one of the prime images of Old England. Much of its survival is thanks to careful conservation. In 1970, the intricate wooden carving throughout the hotel were painstakingly restored by master craftsman Robert Pancheri, whose work earned the UK's Civic Trust Award for excellence in renovation. His contributions preserved centuries of artistry just as they were beginning to fade. Yet, even the grandest buildings are not immune to time. By the early 21st century, the Feathers was showing its age. Plumbing creaked, facilities struggled to meet modern expectations, and the old timbers needed attention. In 2018, the Crest Hotel Group purchased the property and launched an ambitious £2.7 million restoration. Working closely with conservation authorities, they strengthened the structure refurbish the bedrooms and corridors, and sensitively enhance the lounge and restaurant areas, all while maintaining the historic character that defines the hotel. The Feathers English Tea Room reopened in early 2019, following later that year by the new Plume at Feathers restaurant. Today, the Feathers Hotel continues to stand proudly on Ludlow's main street, a living monument to centuries of craftsmanship, hospitality and history. Visitors relax in the Jacobean lounge just as guests did 400 years ago, looking out through the same windows Rhys Jones once stood behind, watching the world of Ludlow pass by. Its beams have absorbed centuries of footsteps and voices. Its rooms have witnessed celebrations, sorrows, arrivals, departures, and everything in between. The building has endured war, plague, political upheaval, and the slow drift of time itself. And with such a long and storied past, it is perhaps inevitable that the Feathers holds more than memories within its walls. Some say history still walks its corridors. If you're enjoying my content and want to help me make even better episodes, you can now support me on Buy Me a Coffee. Every bit helps to upgrade my gear, spend more time researching, and keep bringing the stories you love. Just head over to buymeacoffee.com/ghost tales. It's quick, easy, and really makes a difference. I've also put a link in the description. Thanks for keeping this going. The Feathers Hotel may be celebrated for its Jacobean grandeur, but beneath its carved oak panels and diamond glazed windows lies a reputation far older and far stranger than its historical roots alone can explain. For more than 3 centuries, guests and staff have whispered of figures glimpsed in mirrors, footsteps echoing along empty corridors, and sudden cold breezes that stir the heavy air of its ancient rooms. These stories cling to the Feathers as tightly as the timber beams that hold the building upright, forming a second history. One written not in documents, but in encounters. Perhaps the most unusual of the Feathers' spirits does not wander its corridors at all, but the road outside. She is seen gliding across the bullring. A young girl dressed in a miniskirt, her long dark hair falling loosely over her shoulders. Witnesses describe her as half walking, half floating, moving with an odd, dreamlike rhythm. One such sighting occurred during the summer of 1974, when a commercial traveller arrived in Ludlow for an appointment. Running late and frustrated by the town's tricky parking, he eventually found a space directly opposite the hotel. In his haste, he left vital papers in the car, but when he turned back to retrieve them, he froze. A teenage girl in a miniskirt was gliding straight toward him, then passed through his car as though it were made of smoke. She continued across the street, stepping onto the pavement, and vanished. Shaken, the man stumbled into the hotel bar, gasping out his story. The barman simply nodded, poured him a large brandy, and said, "You're the 6th person this year." Seen most often at midday, she appears real until the moment she dissolves into the air. But her story is stranger still. Paranormal investigator Colin Smith eventually uncovered the truth. The girl was alive. In 1974, she was staying with her family near the bullring and frequently crossed the same stretch of road. The theory is that she imprinted herself on the environment during a particularly happy period in her life. A rare example of what researchers call a living ghost or psychic echo. Of all the hotel rooms, none is spoken of with quite as much dread as room 211. This chamber is said to house a fiercely jealous female spirit who shows open hostility towards women. Her presence is abrupt, physical, and deeply unsettling. One guest reported being violently pulled from her bed by her hair, so powerfully in fact, that she was almost dragged onto the floor. Incredibly, she returned to bed, though sleep did not last long. She awoke again, this time soaked from head to toe. The sheets remained bone dry. Male guests have had a very different experience. Rather than aggression, many describe a gentle, almost affectionate stroking on the face, as though the spirit favoured their company over that of women. Both staff and paranormal guides believe room 211 to be responsible for many sleepless nights. Even experienced investigators describe a heaviness in the air, a deep sense of being watched, and sudden drops in temperature that leave breathing hanging visibly in the room. Further along the upper corridor, another spectral duo is frequently encountered between rooms 232 and 233. Guests often report seeing a well-dressed Victorian gentleman strolling calmly down the passage, accompanied by his faithful dog. They appear solid and entirely lifelike, until they reach the wall between the two rooms. Without hesitation, both man and dog walk straight into it and vanish. Staff have encountered them so often that the pair are considered among the hotel's regulars, a residual haunting replaying across the decades. The Feathers Lounges and its grand hall, with its baronial decor and minstrel balcony, are notorious hotspots for unexplained activity. People resting there in the quiet hours have reported sudden cold drafts where no window is open, the mistakable sound of children running, laughing or clapping in the corridors, objects shifting on their own accord, soft footsteps crossing the hall when it stands empty. The children are heard most frequently in the early hours of the morning, long before any real children are awake, and long after staff have cleared the floors for the night. Some believe these young voices belong to the children of early innkeepers, their excitement and play forever impressed into the building's fabric. Others suspect a more mischievous presence, a poltergeist that delights in making itself known. A particularly unsettling account came from a lady staying at the inn. While escorting a group of Americans on a haunted pub tour, aware of the hotel's reputation but untroubled by it, she entered her room intending only to rest. But as the night wore on, an intense feeling of dread settled over her. While she brushed her teeth, a loud snap echoed from the bedroom. She emerged to find the kettle's short electrical cord, which earlier had been firmly stuck behind heavy furniture, lying meters away across the floor beside her bed, as though it had been violently ripped free. She spent the remainder of the night, with every light on, television blaring, waiting breathlessly for dawn. Her tour guide had previously reported the same overwhelming unease while staying in a different room. Both women suspected that they had crossed paths with the jealous spirit of room 211, or something else that brooded deeper within the hotel. Not all hauntings at the hotel belong to recognised figures. Over the centuries, guests have reported phantom crying echoing from empty rooms, hands gripping their ankles or clothing, sudden shivers or cold spots in the warm weather, shadows moving independently of any light source, and doors opening slowly on their own, as if pushed by invisible fingers. Some investigators claim the building may host a preacher from the reign of King James I, searching endlessly for someone named Richard in what is now the writing room. Paranormal groups conducting overnight vigils have reported extreme temperature changes, phantom footsteps circling their equipment, and unseen hands brushing past them in the dark. What makes the Feathers so haunted? Perhaps it's its age. Perhaps its timber frame holds memories like a great wooden sponge, absorbing the emotions, joys, tragedies, and tensions of centuries. Or perhaps it is something more mysterious. A crossing point, a place where the veil between the living and the dead wears thin. Whatever the cause, one thing is certain: the ghosts of the Feathers are as much a part of its identity as its famous facade. Visitors come for history, for heritage, for comfort, but many leave with something more, a story they cannot explain, a presence they cannot forget.